Hi everyone, Dr. Ginger here. I love to talk about voice killers. Okay, now that's not a very pleasant phrase, so let's translate that into something that sounds a little bit better. Not necessarily voice killers, but a healthy core to pelvic floor, which includes your voice, okay? I call that the voice to pelvic floor approach. So what are we talking about that is a voice killer or something that creates a healthy 3 diaphragm discussion, okay, between the voice, the diaphragm, and the pelvic floor, which are technically 3 diaphragms, right? The key is, one of the many keys, but this is a big key, is not having rigid abs. You'd be surprised at what happens when you have rigid abdominals. If you are sucking it in, and if you are Gen X and older and maybe millennial also, hopefully, Gen Zers and stuff are not still getting this bad information. But in my generation, we got the bad info, to brace. You want a strong core? Brace it and hold it rigid. Even so far as to saying, like, suck it in, right? Wrong, so wrong. That's not what we do, okay? Research shows us that if we have a flexible core, that is a strong core. That is also going to give you your strongest voice and your strongest pelvic floor, but rigidity is the last thing that we want. So, for example, if you were, I'll give you an example from the research, there was a paper published in the last 10 years, and it looked at box jumping in females, or jumping from a height, okay? It's not necessarily CrossFit, but jumping from a height to the floor. Those female athletes that jumped from that height to the floor, and they did their typical, 1980s bracing, okay, or rigid ab holding. I was trying to say bridging for some reason. Those that do that bridging and I said it again, the rigid holding and the bracing actually had increased injury risk for ACL injuries. Okay, so nobody's got time for blowing out their ACL or damaging their meniscus or hurting their hip or that kind of thing. And the reason was there was no force attenuation, which meant the force just stopped at the knee because it could not absorb through the rest of the system. Why? Because the abs were so rigid. It probably also meant, although I cannot say this with certainty because I'd have to go back and look at the study, that they may have been holding the hip muscles rigid too. That's another vocal killer that I'll get to in the next video. But the first point I want to make out of this one is don't rigidly brace your abs. It is a fluid, task-dependent recruitment. And how do you know if you're doing it right? Well, in the clinic, I use imaging. So if you have questions about that, put them in the comments. I answer all reasonable comments, okay? Personally, myself, I do a limited number of free consults, but I'm one person. So if you have genuine questions about it, I'm happy to answer those. You can also hit subscribe if you like this video, share it with your friends. It helps the information reach other people. And you can go to my website, Garner Pelvic Health, for other options, because there are more options than just coming to see me. But in the clinic, I do use ultrasound imaging to track that rigidity or lack thereof so that we can optimize what's called pressure management between those 3 diaphragms.